Please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Good morning, everyone. How is everyone doing? Good. It's pretty early on day 2, which feels like day 20, at least for me. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amy Harder. I just rejoined Axios a couple of weeks ago. I'm the national energy reporter, and it's great to be back. Thank you. Well, welcome to day 2 of Axios House during Climate Week and the UN General Assembly. If you haven't heard, just yesterday, we relaunched the Generate newsletter, which hopefully most of you get, to be the future of energy. We'll focus even more on the people, technology, and resources shaping our energy for tomorrow and through the next decades. So if you're not signed up, make sure to go to Axios.com to get signed up. We'll continue to send newsletters Monday through Friday. We have a jam-packed lineup for today, and I'm so excited about it. We'll hear from climate investor Tom Steyer, Patagonia CEO Ryan Gillert, and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, among many others. Also, if you're following along today on social media, X, LinkedIn, TikTok, there's so many to choose from these days, please use the hashtag AxiosHouse. Now let's get started. This morning we'll be looking at AI's impact on a sustainable future, which if you were here yesterday or any other place in New York, you're probably talking about that a lot already. So without further ado, please welcome our first guest of the day, Ecolab Chairman and CEO, Christoph Beck. Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Are you awake?
I am awake. What about you?
Not quite.
Well, you did have a coffee, but it looks like they confiscated it. So
Yeah, wasn't allowed.
Well, we couldn't have any unapproved advertising for the coffee company that might have been on your cup.
Already?
So, yeah.
Okay.
Life. In case other people in the audience are not awake yet, I'm going to open with a lightning round. And Christoph, I can already tell you like lightning rounds.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
it depends
great.
on the questions.
Well, this won't be too much of a gotcha question. Not what we were talking about backstage, which
No?
I can't talk about, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all, 10 being completely, how much has AI and the corresponding energy boom changed your job?
My own job
Your
as
job.
a CEO? 8.
Okay. So talk about that more. Why has it changed and when did it change?
I thought it was a rapid fire thing there. That's a long question.
Well, see, I needed to get you to say the first part very fast, but now you can elaborate.
Okay, so it was 8.
When did it change? Was it a year ago? Was it 5 years ago? Was it 5 minutes ago?
2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago. You know, even in college, we were talking about artificial intelligence.
And that was a long time ago.
Oh, hey, be nice. My God. Just a few back. Well, welcome to the Axios House. So, yeah, we were talking about that, but we thought it would be just a dream. And 2 years ago, OpenAI came to Earth like that, and we thought it would change the world. And talking to colleagues, there were 2 packs. The one saying, okay, nothing's going to change. It's going to be totally fine. It's going to be one of those innovations we've seen in the past. And the other one saying, it's going to change our world completely. And I said, I'm going to take that group because I firmly believe that AI is going to change everything, mostly for the better, but not only. That's why it's an 8.
So Ecolab has been around a long time in a lot of places. It was originally founded more than a century ago, and you're currently in what, something like 17 countries and 40 industries.
What do you mean, 172 countries?
Oh, whoops, gotta do my fact checking. Maybe I should have asked ChatGPT to fact check me.
Absolutely.
But how are you adapting Ecolab to, oh, you know what I did? I forgot the zero.
Yeah, right. Oh my God. Well,
Those
fake
pesky
news.
numbers. That's why, yes, fake news. That's why I'm in journalism, so I don't have to worry too much about math. Yesterday, with the IBM official, she told us about the math that's in AI, and that was very confusing. You probably know about that. But we're not talking about math today.
No, we were yesterday with the CEO of AB InBev, actually, who explained to us that beer was invented 8,000 years ago in the Temple of Wisdom, and that's where math was invented at the same time as well. So probably beer and AI was invented at the same time, at the same place.
Wow, that's amazing.
I guess that's a new news.
So I see an opportunity there for a beer company to sponsor an event on AI. We'll talk to our events team about that. So how are you adapting Ecolab to AI? I mean, you've been around so long, and yet now you're at the forefront of this new revolution.
You know, we're the largest water company in the world. We do infection prevention as well, and AI needs a lot of water. And most people don't know that. But when we think about it, we had a water problem before AI, and when AI came to Earth a few years ago, as we talked, well, we estimate that AI will require the incremental power of India and the incremental drinking needs, water, of the United States by 2030. So in the next 4 years.
Over what time period is that?
4 years, by 2030. So that was last year that we looked at that as well, because you need to cool the data centers. That requires a lot of water. You need to power them. You need a lot of water to power, to generate power as well, and to produce chips, by the way, which is a big thing that we forget most of the time. It's a water business, the chips manufacturing business as well. So it's a big deal for us just to support the infrastructure and the boom of AI.
So talk a little bit more about that. So how exactly is water used in AI? Can you walk us through how it works? Like,
so we'll do it simple. You want to have it really technical, really scientific?
No. Pretend I'm in 4th grade.
4th grade?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I need to reframe then. No, but 2 big parts, data centers. So you have computers in a room, used to be cooled with an air conditioning in the room. Well, with the power of those computers today, it doesn't work anymore. You need to cool the chips individually in order to absorb all that heat. You need a lot of water for that.
But you still have a lot of AC.
Not that much, actually. We've been using AC so far, which is a water process. You evaporate water, brings obviously so the heat out of the computer and the building, and that's the way data centers have been cooled for a very long time. Now it's changing with technology, but that's where water is being used in data centers. Then you have the other part that we always forget. You need to produce the chips in order to put them in computers in order to generate obviously all the AI that we all love. Well, the chips processing is a water process. You have silicon cylinder. You need to cut it in those wafers that we see in newspapers, obviously. You need to polish them. You need to print them. You need to rinse them. It's a huge amount of water that's being used. One fab requires the same amount of water than the drinking needs of 17 million people. One. And the big ones have many fabs and are building many as well at the same time. So in both cases, you need a lot of water, but we have great innovation that's helping making it work.
So what is Ecolab doing to help? Are you trying to make sure the water use is more efficient? I understand you're working on a lot of recycling of water. Like, how are you helping?
I love that question, Amy. So when you take a fab, it's almost a mile long. It's huge, those production facilities where you produce those chips. Well, the whole process that I mentioned before takes 30 years to go through, so from the beginning of a chip to the end of a chip as well, and sometimes up to 90 days. So it's a huge production process. Well, the way it's being produced today, you have water everywhere, so to rinse those chips at every step of the process, it goes into a wastewater plant, and then afterwards you try to remove the silicium, which is not a good thing, obviously, for people and for planet, as we know, and it's valuable as well at the same time. So what we've done as a company is to invent technologies where you can reuse water at every step of that process. You got the silicium, you reuse the water, you polish it, you reuse the water. It's much easier because
it doesn't need to
one
be
thing.
It doesn't need to be like pristine drinking water.
It has to be. Actually, in a fab, the quality of the water is 1,000 times more pure than the water you use for drug that you inject in your blood. Wow. So it's super pure. And
these are very high maintenance chips.
It is high maintenance. And the smallest the nodes, or the most powerful chips that you have, the more pure the water needs to be, because every impurity of the water kills that chip. That's on the wafer as well. So super pure water that you need to reuse and recycle, it's never been done. Less than 5% of the water is being recycled today in chips manufacturing.
Less than 5%.
Less than 5%. And we've developed technology, we're developing technology with the big manufacturing guys in order to reuse and recycle that water at ultra purity level. It's really hard. But basically what we've said, we need to redesign all those processes as if wastewater were not existing. Nature has done that for millions of years. We always use the same water, obviously. Don't overthink it, obviously, because the water that you've been drinking, well, came from a different place, obviously. Well, it's always the same that you're using. We're trying to do the same in manufacturing. Well, this is really hard, especially when you need to have those purity levels.
So you're in 170 countries.
Yes.
You live in Minneapolis.
I do.
You're from Switzerland.
Yes.
You mentioned only 5% of the water is recycled. Is there a role for governments to mandate better use of water for data centers?
I don't think that government is the biggest help in that whole story. Government can do a lot of things. I don't know if that's the best. But one of the ways for government to rethink about water, because when we talk about infrastructure, the thing that's really weird with government is that they think about renovating old infrastructure like the Romans would have done. So you kind of renovate the pipes and the whole plumbing and the whole pumps and the old way. It's a little bit like if we were to renovate all the phone lines that we had in the past, because phones are going to work much better like that. Well, you have cell phone today, or you have whatever technology that you want to use. Well, let's go to a total different new technology where you say, well, every hotel is reusing its own water. This is true for a manufacturing plant, as we talked before as well. It can be for a steel mill as well, so that we rethink infrastructure in total different ways, and that government can do instead of renovating old stuff that nobody needs, and ultimately is not going to solve the problem. We need 56% more water than what the Earth can provide today in the next 4 years. And just a quick fact, since you love facts, you put the whole water, fresh water, lakes, rivers, in one bubble. Do you know how big that bubble would be?
The size of Manhattan?
Yes, 35 miles. That's the size of the bubble. You put all the drinking water.
We did not coordinate on that.
We did not.
Did not
no
know.
setup. But think about it, the whole planet, all the water that's available, non-salt water, obviously, 35 miles. That's all we have. You think about population growth, business growth, AI, well, that bubble is all we've got. So we'll have to reuse and recycle it all the time.
Do you think desalination is a solution to the problem?
No, it's very expensive. It requires a lot of energy. It needs to be close to the sea, obviously. So it's part of the solution. But when you think about it, so reusing it at every location is the easiest way to do it. And you know, you get in a hotel and you get all those signs of saying, so don't ask for new linen, so every day, your housekeeping, I mean, all the things that we use to it. We're saying, why do we think it that way? If it's done in a way that's circular, if it's done with power that's renewable, if it's done with biodegradable chemistry, you can use as many towels, as many times your linen in your room as well. It's better life. And the way I think about sustainability, the way Ecolab thinks about it, it's an approach of abundance. Enjoy life, grow faster, but have a good impact on people and planet while doing so. That's the power of innovation.
So we have a few moments left. We're going to do a couple more lightning rounds. Are you ready?
Wow.
These are going to be
Yeah.
actual lightning rounds. So just remember that, okay?
Okay. Good.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all, 100 being completely, how worried are you about the water use of AI?
Not much. It's either
What's
it's
the
going to be
number?
10 or it's going to be 1.
Ooh,
and I
that's
think it's
so
clearly
helpful.
going to be 1. Because we have no choice. We'll make it work because the technology exists. Where is the prime minister of, or the premier as he's called, from Cape Town? They went to day 0 a few years back, as we know. Well, they found a solution to make it work because they had no choice. I think AI is going to be in the same place.
Well, that's interesting. You're right. We all heard about day 0 and then we didn't hear anything else. there wasn't enough stories about the innovation that solved that problem, but there
Which
should
has
be.
been amazing what they
Yeah.
did. You listen to that guy, it's really impressive. And they know how to deal with it in the future. So for AI, a lot of innovation. This is what's powering our company as well. We've been 102 years in business. Well, this one is going to be a big boom. I like it.
Okay, we're going to end with a game of Would You Rather. Are you ready?
No,
Okay. Would you rather work more with governments or other companies?
other companies.
Would you rather have an AI model that always agrees with you or always pushes back on you?
Pushes back.
Would you rather work for a company 100 years in the past or 100 years in the future?
In the future.
Would you rather see the past or change the future?
Change the future.
With that, thank you very much, Christoph, for this conversation.
That was quick. Thank you
It
so
was
much.
quick, because we're out of time. Thank you, Christoph. And now over to Axios publisher Nicholas Johnston.
Thank you, Emmett.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicholas Johnston. I'm the publisher of Axios. Thank you so much for being here today on day 2 of Axios House during an awesome climate week. We're very grateful for you taking time out of the day to join us. We're also hugely grateful for our partners. Nothing we do at Axios is possible without the support of our partners. The investments we make in journalism around the United States, great houses and conversations like this. So huge thanks to Salesforce to making today's conversation possible. And I'm very excited to welcome to the Axios stage from Salesforce their Senior Vice President of Impact, Sonia Norman, and Vice President and Head of Public Affairs and Strategic Relations, Margaret Taylor. Sonia and Margaret, welcome to Axios House. Hello. Have a seat. Usually, let's start big picture. So usually when I'm on the stage at Climate Week, I am talking to energy companies. Salesforce is not an energy company. So maybe this is for you, Sonia. Tell us, why you're here and why this conversation is important to Salesforce.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, Salesforce is leading CRM, and we're poised to be leading agentic AI company. And AI, as the previous conversation told us all about, requires energy and water and natural resources. So really the future of AI is sustainable AI. That's how we're going to figure out how to scale AI responsibly.
How are we going to do that then? Kind of begs the question. I feel like every conversation here at Climate Week is dominated by those two themes, like the huge growth of AI, the huge power consumption of AI, and now striking that right balance for how we do it correctly. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's going to take all of us, right? You know, the technology sector needs to lead, but it's a full value chain challenge. And the way that we're thinking about it is through a 3-pillar framework. So smart demand, efficiency, and clean supply. And the way you think about that is not every challenge is an AI challenge, so you need to really scope your AI initiative in a strategic way. Not every challenge that is an AI challenge requires a large frontier model. The industry is really moving more towards purpose-built, domain-specific models that are much more carbon and energy efficient, so that's really exciting. Then, of course, efficiency. Many of us in the technology sector have been thinking about these issues for how do we make data centers the most efficient from a resource perspective as they can be. And the business benefit is that they're really cost effective then. You know, lower energy bills, better things like latency that our customers care about. So really important.
Do you have to pick among those three? How do you balance those possibly competing pillars?
We never like to pick, right? We never like to make it a zero-sum
I love all my
game.
children equally.
Exactly. We love all of our children. Ideally, you would have activities across that spectrum, and a lot of companies like Salesforce are also leaning into policy and advocacy, which my colleague
Right. Well,
Margaret
that's what I
will
want to
talk more
bring
about.
Margaret into the conversation here. What's fascinating about Climate Week and why these are so, I think, valuable conversations is that everyone, the people who show up care and are also the ones writing those policies, or at least think they're the ones writing the policies. Margaret, share a little bit about how these folks can work together, and what are the partnerships that are important to drive progress on these topics?
Of course. So, we are always led by our core values at Salesforce. Sustainability is one of them, but trust is our number one core value. And I think when we think about public policy, you have to lead from that place. That's how we show up when we talk to policymakers. That's, when we go into an elected official's office and we want to engage and say, when the EU AI Act was being written, that's how we come to the table. But it's also how we think about how we partner internally and have to come together to think about how are we going to balance how we're showing up for all of our stakeholders. So that means how we're showing up for the climate. It also means how we're showing up for our shareholders and all of those competing interests. So, when we love all our children equally, that,
right.
that is actually how we have to do that. And, we're here at Climate Week, but we're also here for UN General Assembly. And that is exactly the core of that, is that multi-stakeholder process.
What does that partnership look like then internally? It was interesting, it's not just a policy person, it's not just a sustainability person, you're both here. Tell us a little bit about this buddy comedy that you folks have and how that radiates outward, both for partners in the community here for climate, but then also globally for the UN.
Yeah, well, tonight we're gonna have a comedy show. You're all invited. No, but actually, really seriously, we have worked together for a long time at the company, and we're really lucky. We at Salesforce have really thought about this really seriously. Impact and our public policy teams have worked together to make sure that we are balancing the needs of the company and also balancing the needs of what we want to achieve to make the world a better place. Stakeholder capitalism has always been a part of the company, and it's something that we have done through Pledge 1% from the very beginning, but it's also something that our CEO has made sure has been embedded as to who we are as an institution and how we show up.
I wonder if you could share a little bit what's working. Are there policies that are moving the needle? Are there things that you folks are working on, things that you hear about as you wander the streets here at Climate Week? What is we should keep an eye on?
Sonia and I were actually talking about this morning at coffee, is, we talk a lot about AI policy because there's so much going on in the last 18 months. But one thing that's really important is AI policy is not just what's happened in the last 18 months with things like EU AI Act or what's going on in US states, or even the AI executive order. We just heard from Christoph Beck about water issues and things like that. When we think about AI, there's a lot of issues that have been going on. What about our energy grid resiliency, something that Sonia's team's been leading on in partnership with the public policy team at Salesforce for a long time. These are real issues we have to think about that are not just AI specific, but things that are going to impact our future 10 years ago and 10 years in the future. So we have done things like support RTOs for Western states in the past, and those are things that we're going to continue to have to do. It's not just about AI, but it's exacerbated.
It's not like AI started and all of a sudden now we care about sustainability and
Correct.
energy use. You've been thinking about this more than 18 months.
Exactly.
So. Sonia, what are the things that you're looking at?
I would just add that for companies like ours to show up credibly and to build that trust with policymakers and regulators, you really have to have skin in the game, right? And so having over a decade of both sustainability and AI leadership has given us the credibility to go not only articulate our position, but actually help educate these folks. Everyone's learning together around AI, and a lot of policymakers don't have the baseline knowledge that they need to think about these issues that are so nuanced.
Education comes up a lot, and so I want to pivot that a little bit to what's the homework for folks listening here in the room or online? What should they take away from this conversation? How can they be a force for good when they go back to their companies, their agencies, their countries?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'm sure Margaret has a perspective as well. The way that we think about how companies should engage on impact issues is really through materiality. Who are you? What kind of business do you have? What's your sector? How do you show up in the world? And for us, like I mentioned, as a technology company, we need to have an answer for sustainable AI. We've been working on these issues for a long time. For a food and beverage company, they're probably going to lean into other issues. So think about who you are and use your superpower, what you're best at. There are so many issues. You can't do everything. You really have to focus.
What about you, Margaret?
Yes, absolutely. I think being authentic is the most important piece of that because you can't do everything. And so also find a coalition that works for you and really dive in there because you can't do it alone. And that's the whole spirit of this week.
So the advice is to be a little thoughtful about it. What might work for one type of company or one type of organization might not work for you because you're in a different line of business. Well, let's spin this forward a little bit as we think about the challenges, but then like all that you've learned and how you work with folks here. Like what makes you optimistic about figuring this out? There's a jump ball. Who wants it?
Oh, I will absolutely do this. One thing, well, actually, two quick things about that. One is I think it's really important that everyone's still here. I think there's been a lot of doom and gloom coming into this week, but everybody still showed up. And I think we're having the conversations about really tough topics, and people want to make a difference. A second piece is, I'll just do a little plug. At Salesforce, we recently just released an AI readiness index where we were looking at some surveying of general population, handful of countries about how they were feeling about being ready for the AI skills that they need for the future. And they're pretty excited about it. And so I think that there is actually a lot of excitement about what the future can hold. And so if we can harness that, there's so much that we can really do together.
What's your mood when walking around the streets? I mean, you've got a packed week here. Like, what is the sense of people's optimism around this topic?
Yeah, one of the pillars of our sustainability strategy is to support what we call ecopreneurs.
Right.
So entrepreneurs focused on social and environmental issues. And we do that with for-profit companies through our ventures arm. We have an impact fund. And then we also support them through our philanthropy for the nonprofit entrepreneurs. And the innovation coming out of these startups and these NGOs is mind-blowing.
Right.
And these are the stories that really, when I'm having a rough day, I think about. One of my favorite from our ventures portfolio is a company called Pano AI, and they're doing early wildfire detection. And if you think about it, this is a perfect, going back to that smart demand, is a perfect use case for computer vision and generative AI, because humans cannot be everywhere where there's wildfire risk. But satellite imagery can capture that, flag that very quickly, and get responders out. And you're talking about potential avoidance of life loss, of course, reduction of damage, but also fire containment. So really important real-world impacts. And so when we see something like that that wasn't possible 10 years ago, suddenly being a game changer, I'm really inspired by that.
I don't want to be a Debbie Downer before we end here, but I do want to just take a little bit of skeptical note. Like, we talked about all this optimism and all this collaboration. What do you think are the challenges that we have to overcome? Like, what are the things that are worried about that people should think about that we have to face to solve for this?
Yeah, I would say the pace of just innovation is both the huge advantage, like we're breaking barriers constantly from a technology and what's possible perspective, but it also is hard to hold all of these factors when you're moving so quickly. We have to be really intentional. Like right now we're poised to build new data center infrastructure to build up our capacity. We have to do that with clean infrastructure and build out more clean and renewable energy.
You have to be able to do it now.
We
that
have
can't
to do
be
that now.
2 years from now. Margaret,
you're locked in.
What is top of mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, from a public policy standpoint too, I mean, there is not all AI is the same. And so there is a lot of, we haven't always learned from lessons of the past with technology. And so there's a lot that is often kind of whiplash coming out, and it's putting all AI in the same, as an enterprise software company, we are not the same as a consumer. And so, balancing innovation with protecting individuals is really challenging. And, we are hopeful that our friends in government can figure it out alongside us, and we're there to help, but that is a challenge we've got to figure out.
And that's the job, back to pounding the pavement up and down the streets of Midtown during Climate Week at United Nations General Assembly. Before we get the hook here, I want to end on one fun thing, like we end all Axios newsletters on one fun thing. Let's do this one AI thing. I love asking people about their real AI use cases. So tell me a fun way, Margaret, we'll start with you, that you use AI in your life.
Well, hopefully my husband's not watching this, because this evening I will be editing the ceremony. He is going to be officiating for his sister's wedding with Claude on the flight.
So,
sorry, Jordan.
Robot wedding ceremony.
I love that. We have a tradition on my team, actually Ashley's in the audience, helped kick this off. For everyone who has a birthday in my work team, we use Slack AI to compose a poem based on bullets you throw in about their best qualities and maybe their top projects for the year. And so it helps us be more creative and bring out our humor.
How are they? Good poems?
Mid at best.
I do a lot of these, and I'm always surprised at the number of people who are using robots to write poetry. It is like a very common use case. Well, we'll add that to the list. Sonia, Margaret, thanks so much for being here. Huge thanks to Salesforce for making this conversation possible. We're going to take a very short break to refill coffee, grab more snacks, and then my colleague Ben Gaman will be up here to close the conversation. Thanks folks.
Nick.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Gather around, gather around. And welcome to day 2 of Axios House during Climate Week and the UN General Assembly. And thank you so much for sticking around this morning. I'm Ben Gieman, an energy reporter with Axios. And without further ado, we have one final guest this morning from a very small but emerging startup called Amazon. And so I would like to please welcome Amazon's Chief Sustainability Officer, Kara Hurst. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. Your company has been the world's largest clean energy buyer for 5 years running. But some of that is in the US, I believe a substantial part, not all. And we've had some very seismic policy changes here. So I'm wondering, how will the new US budget law affect your procurement plans in the US for, say, the next 1, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, no, well, thanks for having me and for that question. We're really, actually proud of that record. We had committed to be, powered by clean energy across our global operations and had been headed towards that goal by 2030. We actually achieved that in 2023. So we're really ahead of schedule. You're right that it's global. We have over 600 projects across the world that are funding that. It's a variety of wind, solar, and now nuclear energy.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of clean energy. We're looking at clean, firm power across all of our global operations, pursuing that, all kinds of power. Certainly looking at other things also like grid modernization, looking at geothermal tech, a whole combination of things that we're going to need. So working in conjunction with this administration, I think there's a lot of areas we can work together. We have a lot of common goals. I mean, certainly on accelerating things like the availability of nuclear, advancing technologies on small modular. We're making those investments in a lot of ways. So I think there's a lot of common ground that we can find and a lot of ways that we can continue to advance those technologies that we're all going to need to power some of the things that are coming.
Thank you. So full steam ahead on that despite the big changes. Yeah. Great, thank you. I want to dive into AI. I mean, the discussion around AI and climate and energy can sprawl in a lot of different directions. Yeah. But Amazon is already deploying some very specific climate-related solutions in a lot of different areas. Specifically, I wanted to ask about disaster response. Can you talk about AI's role in responding to Hurricane Helene?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think AI, much like the climate narrative, AI presents us with so many opportunities. So I think one of the things that we need to really focus in is what opportunities it can have. And with something like disaster relief, that example is a great one. So last fall with Hurricane Helene, when something like that happens, time is of the essence. And it's both of the essence for the people on the ground who are affected by something like that when it happens, but also for the teams that are coming in to address the situation. It can be a dangerous situation. There can be a lot of unknowns. And so with something like that, we used AI to map out, we had, I think, about a lot of information about what was happening on the ground. We used AI to think about mapping that terrain. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of different data points about what was going on the ground. We had about 28 miles of terrain to map where that hurricane had hit in Tennessee and North Carolina. And so we looked at mapping that out, and we got that information really in seconds rather than days. So what it would have taken the team was about 28,000 data points, and looked at mapping out all of that information, providing it to that first responders team to tell them exactly where to go. So one, what are the high priority areas that needed addressing? And then secondly, and importantly, protecting their safety. Yeah. So, where the unstable ground was, pointing them in the directions about having that information. So I think what AI can do is that efficiency point, super important because time is of the essence, but also people's safety being paramount.
Absolutely. Thank you. Certainly AI has a lot of different corporate sustainability applications as well.
Absolutely.
I wanted to play back something that you wrote in a recent column that I thought was really interesting. You said, you wrote, applied across millions of products globally, AI can eliminate what has always been the first barrier to climate action, the prohibitive cost of simply knowing where to begin. Can you give me some sort of, perhaps industry or product-specific examples of that where these tools can help companies begin that journey and know where to begin?
I think one of the big things that we see. I mean, so one of the things we're really excited about is our climate pledge that we took in 2019. We have said this week we have over 600 companies that have joined us alongside in our commitment to be net zero carbon by 2040. That's amazing progress. 100 of those have joined us this year. So continuing to see progress, number one, on climate goals. But one of the things that companies are joining us in that action with is because everybody wants to get started. And taking that first step, sometimes it's a company that will say, we've made these commitments. We want to join joint action projects to decarbonize our operations, and we want to do that in ways to electrify our fleet or to make material changes to our products or to decarbonize building materials, to buy better cement, better steel. But some of this is companies who say, I don't know how to map my carbon footprint. And I don't have a team like you do at Amazon. I'm a small company. I'm a person of one. I don't know where to begin. AI is perfect for that kind of solution. So what we've done is we've taken our knowledge in AI and we've built tools that we want to open source, we want to share. So a couple of examples of that are we've built an AI tool that can take the ability to map your carbon footprint very quickly with the data and the information. We want to share that kind of thing that will, it's 99% quicker to map a carbon footprint with that AI tool. We have another tool we've developed internally called Rapid LCA.
Life cycle
assessment.
Assessment.
Yes. So if you don't know what that is, it's basically taking all the components when you make a product, from when the product is designed and developed, what materials go into it, how a product is utilized, and then how it's disposed at end of life. And when you think of that full life cycle of a product, that takes a company typically months, and it's very expensive to do. But we developed a Rapid LCA tool with AI, and we've done, I think, 4,000 of those in the last quarter. That is unbelievable progress with AI. It's going to save thousands and thousands, if not millions of dollars for companies. We haven't open sourced that yet. We have to look at what we can do with that. But those kind of savings internally for us are already showing up. They're exciting for our scientists to work on, and they allow us to have better information about our own impacts. So we have other things like a packaging decision engine that help us and our people internally in our fulfillment network to make better decisions about our packaging materials. So we take millions of decisions every day about what types of packaging to put on the products that we send to our customers who want right-sized and minimized packaging, but you also want to protect the product. We don't want to ship a damaged product to a customer, because then you get into reverse logistics, more trucks on the road, more fuel impact, all the environmental impacts that go along with that. And so if you can intervene and you can have AI have a better packaging decision, we've been able to save 4.2 million metric tons of packaging alone since 2015. A lot of these things with AI we've been using for many years. So some of this isn't new and it's been invisible to the customer, but it's for our customer obsession, for their benefit. We've been utilizing machine learning and AI for many, many years. Some of it is things like a customer fit, where you might want to purchase a product and you just want to have the thing that fits the best. If you're buying a fashion item, a t-shirt or a dress or something like that, all you want is the best fitting item. You don't want to buy several of them and have to return a few. That's an AI-driven fit engine on our site. So you're seeing it as something that's just a really good experience for the customer. For us, that means less product return to us, less reverse logistics, and of course, less environmental. So it doesn't have to be sustainability out in front to the customer.
Yeah.
We know it is, but for the customer, a better experience. I can go on and on about these examples, but they're really fun. It's really fun for our teams to experiment with AI, great sustainability impacts, and it's just all over the place in the company we're experimenting with it.
So it sounds like there's a lot of cases in which the customer might not necessarily know, or it might not be front of mind, that their experience with the company is influenced by AI, but it sounds like it very much is already.
Absolutely, already. And I think we're going to find these use cases every single day.
Definitely, definitely. Another thing I wanted to get to is that, obviously there's a lot of discussion about data center growth creating new grid challenges that we've all heard a lot about, both, in terms of overall demand, but also sort of localized grid stresses. But, the flip side of that energy equation, I think, is a really interesting conversation. There are many ways in which AI can sort of help with clean energy. What do you see as some of the biggest areas of potential, whether it's battery chemistry, carbon capture? Please take that where you will.
Yeah, I think there are, again, opportunities. So one of the things we can do is we can optimize the current, energy portfolio that we have. So we can get more out of the renewable energy portfolio that we can have. And that can be demand shaping. It can be looking at things like how do we optimize the renewable energy. We can think about battery storage and how do we optimize battery storage. We can think about grid enhancing technologies and when do we deploy them. I think there's a lot we don't know, things like digital twinning. We can look at how do we model, in a certain location, what's going to be the best use of energy. So we use AI in many, many different ways throughout our energy portfolio. And I think there's going to be a lot more to come in terms of even land use and siting and where we put things that will have impacts on energy as well. When we think about things like other things that have demand on grid, as we electrify our fleet, which of course we want to do to decarbonize our operations, all the infrastructure that has to go into building that electrification on the back end to support the fleet. Where do we put that, and how do we use AI to help us make those kinds of decisions as well on siting?
Absolutely. I can imagine that actually this sort of location of infrastructure and the sort of logistics around how to sort of, whether it's a traditional engine or an electric vehicle, where to do the charging, I'm sure all these things could greatly benefit from AI optimization.
Yeah, or even like our ability to work with we have a team internally called supply chain optimization. And so where we place inventory, can we place it closer to a customer? Can we locate it closer to rail, because rail is going to be a better choice than putting inventory on an airplane? That's going to, vastly increase our carbon footprint. So those kinds of algorithmic decisions where you can optimize inventory or you can make a siting decision have a huge impact on a scale like ours. So some of this is really interesting when you can get into those back-end decisions, and AI allows us to do a lot of modeling very, very quickly.
Definitely. Amazon is of course a for-profit business, and so one of the things that I'm sort of wondering about is, of all the different AI sustainability-related applications that you are piloting and commercializing, I'm sure there's 1,000 different ones for every 2 or 3 we talked about today. Which of these do you see becoming perhaps significant financial benefits for, which of them would provide the most significant financial benefits for Amazon, whether that's in creating new products or creating new efficiencies, or how does this help the bottom line in the biggest ways?
I honestly don't know that I've thought about it in that way yet. Mm-hmm. I certainly think that some of our energy optimization has the potential to be that. But I don't think we know yet what that might be. That we're in some early days of discovery. Mm-hmm. And I think that my job is to look at the company through a sustainability lens, through a customer-obsessed lens. So I look at it, what's going to benefit our customers, what's going to benefit the planet. I'm excited about things that will be that co-benefit. We have another one that we're working on food waste. I think that's a really important issue for the planet that has, a lot of potential financial benefit. But I'm looking at it again through a sustainability lens.
Absolutely, absolutely. Are there, on the sort of federal policy side, are there any particular changes that you feel like could be most supportive of this work that you are not seeing yet from the current administration?
I think we're working well together on the things that we both care about. And I think that they are looking to move fast and cut through some of the things that were taking a long time before. So, again, looking at things like how can we modernize the grids, that's one where we're really excited to move faster.
Definitely, definitely. Our time is getting short. I had a perhaps unanswerable, but I think interesting question. How soon, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, do you think that emissions cuts enabled by AI will begin to outpace emissions growth from increased data center energy demand? Or has that even happened already?
I don't think it's happened already. I do think that, we talk a lot about paths that are not linear, and I think this is one of them. I don't know if it's answerable today. Mm-hmm. I do think that it's going to be something, though, where right now people are talking about it as if it won't happen, and I do think it will happen. I think that that's going to be something where if we really take the opportunity to think about AI as a tool we can use for good, mm-hmm. and we think about all of the use cases for AI, it will increase energy demand. However, we have to use it as a tool for our benefit and think about all of the possibilities that we can apply it to sustainability use cases. Where we can use it, we have to dig in, learn how to use it to not only maximize our time internally and efficient use of our own human resources, right? Or we can, get those skills and the things that we don't want to be doing, the rote tasks off of our plates so that we can do bigger tasks. But also the things that, like I just talked about with Rapid LCA, or things like making better decisions. We have another use case where we identify broken products within our fulfillment network so we don't ship them out to customers. So I think things like that are huge cost savings. And when you think about those applications and then further on down the line, the implications that they will have to energy savings, we haven't begun to add those up yet. And I think there's a huge possibility when you think about the implications for what we will yet invent. And I'm actually really optimistic about it.
Absolutely. It is a fascinating and extremely interesting and evolving area. So I think, unfortunately, we are out of time. I went
so fast.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for joining us here. And thank you, everybody, for joining us at Axios House. And our next event will actually begin around 10:30. So please be sure to stick around. And thank you again, everybody.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thank you.
Please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Good afternoon. Well, maybe it's still morning. We're in the waning moments of morning. Good before noon, everyone. I'm Nicholas Johnston. I'm the publisher of Axios. Thank you so much for being here. We're in the midst of an awesome week of events here at Axios House on the sidelines of Climate Week and United Nations General Assembly. We're very grateful for you all here for a conversation about insurance, housing, and the costs of climate change. Not only are we grateful for your presence, we're grateful for all the partners that have made all of our programming this week possible. So huge thanks to the Potential Energy Coalition for being the supporter of this conversation. And I'm very happy to welcome to the stage for a view from the top conversation to kick us off today, the founder and CEO of the Potential Energy Coalition, John Marshall. John, welcome to Axios House. Hello, sir. How are you?
Very well.
I think probably the best way to start today is big picture. I mean, maybe introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about your firm's research and your work.
That's great. Yeah, I'm John Marshall. I run a firm called Potential Energy, which was forced upon me by my 17-year-old. I have a 35-year career in marketing and as a management consultant, and one day he confronted me and said, "Dad, you useless fellow, you're selling soap and shampoo and the world's coming to an end." So he locked me in the house. So we started a company. It's a nonprofit firm that is basically, think of it as the marketing firm for climate change. And so our goal is to really deeply understand citizens, to find the messages that work in order to sell the solutions that we need. So it's a unique, I would say, bespoke climate change marketing firm, and for the last 5 years, we've been in the search of how do you get people to care about climate change, and which brings me here to talk about insurance.
So let's dig in a little bit, like on this journey from the marketing standpoint. So there's like a narrative around this. I feel like you spend a lot of time trying to understand that narrative. Like, where is the conversation now, and like, how are you trying to push it?
Well, the essence of the work is really, like I did in the commercial sector, to basically find an empirical grounding for how do you move a citizen to support the types of policies that we need. And so at Potential Energy, we've done about 1,200 message tests and sat in about 4,000 hours of focus groups, run a bunch of campaigns that we've measured in the search for how do you get people to care more about the issue. And one of the things that we've really seen is, in many ways, climate messaging has a little bit of a crisis of relevance right now. There's been a particularly recent phenomenon, which I call climate hushing, where you're seeing leaders fear that it's too narrow, too political, maybe not relevant enough. Is this an issue that regular citizens care about? And those could be corporate leaders, those can be political leaders, those can be NGO leaders. And the data is not great on this. We've seen the average citizen hearing about climate change 18% of citizens hear about it once a week, and that is half what it used to be a few years ago. And so a big cause of that from our data is a lot of the messages that get used go after a pretty narrow base, are fairly political, and aren't necessarily that motivating. And so what we've been on the hunt for at Potential Energy is how do you make this relevant not to the 30% of people, but to the 70% of people.
Where does insurance fit into? Like, we're gonna have a conversation about like where the insurance component fits into that. Where does that bubble up in the research?
Yeah, I think, well, not to pick on what doesn't work before I get to what does work, but just to amplify a little bit what the data tells us. It tells us that, one observation I'll make is thinking about climate change as an environmentalist's issue has not necessarily led us to the breadth that we need. There's a Gallup poll that shows how the number of people who consider themselves an environmentalist has gone from 71% down to about 40 over the last 3 decades. And so the values-based, moral-based, sacrifice-based, or the concept stuff, like broad, complicated concepts, hasn't necessarily landed. And so concepts like environmental justice and environmental jobs and banning fossil fuels and the things that have been the province of the environmental movement haven't really been sufficient to get us a breadth of support that we need. So what have we learned? We've learned that we need a really big shift from morality to materiality. Now, the impacts of climate change are giving us that. And so this is where insurance comes in. We are facing a situation where not 30% of people are going to be concerned about an issue because they've made a political or values-based choice, but 100% of people are going to be concerned about an issue because their home insurance rates are going up. So the shift from morality to materiality has started to happen. We think it's the wellspring of tomorrow's narratives that we actually talk about how it actually affects real people's costs, the availability of insurance. And so that's why we think insurance is interesting. And it just so happens that when we do these message tests, we see that these insurance cost messages are in the top decile of the 1,200 messages we've tested. And so when you make the linkage for somebody that a dramatic rise in extreme weather is actually costing them money in their annual costs, you suddenly create a much different view of the issue, and it goes from the moral to the material.
And this isn't speculative on your part. Like, you're talking about all the focus groups you've done. These are messages that you have tested with real human beings to gauge their response?
Yes, this is an absurd amount of testing. This is based on probably half a million people with 1,200 messages. And so we're constantly, anytime someone has a hypothesis, and climate change is a little subject of fads and hypotheses. Oh, we shouldn't do X, we should do Y. We shouldn't talk about fear, we should talk about hope. We shouldn't talk about X, we should talk about Y. So we don't care about any of that. We don't bring any values or any perspectives. All we're bringing into the calculus is pure raw data, like I would for a commercial client. And in this case, the material messages work. And I think that the unfortunate reality is that we have 100% certainty that the materiality is going to get worse. And so every year that goes by, the messages about people's costs and how it's actually affecting them in their communities becomes a more productive message, and it likely is the source from which climate support will emanate in the future.
Spin this forward, like look ahead 10 years, and then how do you see this trajectory evolving? And maybe like as a follow-up to that, like what I love about like these kinds of convenings we do here at Climate Week is like these are the people who care and can probably make a difference. What's your advice to them to keep bending it in the right direction?
Yeah, I think, well, overall, I think for the climate movement to be successful, we need a broad non-political movement. And that feels really hard today, right? It feels like, oh, let's not talk about it because it's too political. The very interesting thing about going directly after people's real lives, their real costs, especially locally, is that you have an impact for both conservatives and progressives alike. That's going to happen even more. So the climate message is a means by which we can actually build a stronger, less political climate movement over time. And we are going to see the costs of your home insurance keep rising as a portion of total mortgage. And we're going to see more insurers, sadly, pull out of different markets. We're going to see that be in the news more. We're going to see people starting to make the connection. And here's what's interesting to us. Over 2/3 of Americans are highly concerned about their insurance costs. If you live in a high-risk zone, 80% of Americans are highly concerned about their insurance costs. They're only going in one direction right now. And about half of the people have made the connection to basically pollution-fueled extreme weather. So we are facing what I would say is a very important opportunity, because when you make that connection, it's extremely economic to have people say, oh, something is wrong here. I'm going to think about this. And if you ask the question, who should be paying for this? You start to open people's minds to the fact that this is actually an environmental and a pollution-driven problem, not just something about the insurance industry. And it will be something that the industry and business players will have to discuss, because the problem is not going away. The carbon is in the atmosphere. The temperature rises are irreversible. The damages are going to be more expensive. And so we think having a messaging construct that gets ahead of that reality will actually help us all make climate less political and make policy solutions happen.
I mean, you think about that opportunity you mentioned, like there's like half of Americans that still like are not there yet, but they're soon going to begin feeling these effects. And if you can explain it to them with that message, then they're going to be on board.
Right, and
solution.
It's a decently simple message. Insurance rates are rising across America. Your town could be next, and that actually gets people's attention, and it moves it away from something that you have to make a values-based choice for, because you and your neighbors are talking about this anyway, and it's a way to think about an actual phenomenon that's actually hitting people's wallets. And so we see the next decade being about climate materiality, and we see that as the really important mechanism to swell the ranks of support for the issue.
That's a great framing. Thank you for all your hard work on all these focus groups and talking to all these people. I think that's a great way to think about the conversations continuing. John, thanks for being here. Thanks for Potential Energy for sponsoring us today. And we're going to bring Courtney Brown up here to continue the conversation and go deeper on all these topics. Thanks, John.
Terrific. Thank you.
Hello. Wow. Hello, everyone. I'm Courtney Brown. Thank you, Nick, for that wonderful introduction. I'm Senior Economics Reporter at Axios. I'm the co-author of Axios Macro, which will be, if you are subscribed, in your inbox in the next hour or so. If you're not subscribed, you still have time to get today's edition. I'm so excited to be here. We're going to continue the conversation that Nick was just having. We're going to introduce DeltaTerra Capital founder and CEO, David Burt. I will tell the audience at the end the very embarrassing thing I said to you when I first saw you today, but they'll have to wait for that. You say that the climate crisis with respect to the economy, it's not something happening down the line, happening right now. Why?
Yeah, that's correct. I think there's a major paradigm shift happening in real estate markets right now. And that's probably the biggest parallel with like the 2008 crisis. An asset bubble has accumulated.
And just for people who don't know, that's kind of your claim to fame. You called the 2008 crisis before many other people did.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's sort of my job as a professional investor to identify mispricing issues in capital markets and trade on them, and that was certainly one of the biggest ones I looked at in my career.
Mm-hmm. And so the difference between what we're seeing now and the 2008 crisis, you told me backstage, it's not as big.
Yeah, it's more regionally regional centric. So the subprime, the withdrawal of subprime mortgage lending across the country was felt kind of everywhere. Right. This is likely to be more acute, frankly, but only in the 20 to 25% of regions that are really having the liability of the properties in those markets change.
Okay. I think if you're talking to anyone on the street who's watching the financial markets right now, kind of hard to convince them there is a crisis underway. Stock markets are at all-time high. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of insidious. The most investors are empiricists by nature, so you want to backtest to sort of define what's happening. And what we're experiencing now is actually quite new. So I think investors are struggling to put all the pieces together. There's also a lot of incentives, misalignments in the capital markets that support some of the activities that are most exposed, like mortgage lending.
So where are investors pricing in the risk?
They're starting to think about, insurers are starting to hike premiums. And Some lenders are starting to think about increasing insurance requirements or being more careful about insurance mandates. I'd say those are the two sort of leading changes. Yeah.
Tell me how the crisis plays out from here. We're starting to see insurers hike premiums. What happens next?
Yeah, well, I would say this really started becoming apparent in markets maybe in 2022. You had two big changes in insurance schemes. One was the repricing of flood insurance by FEMA in 2021 called Risk Rating 2.0. The other was just the rapid withdrawal of private insurers from California, given the buildup in sort of mispriced wildfire liabilities. So I'd say that buildup has been happening for some time, but those two systems started to bring it into sort of the ethos of the markets, and you started to see supply build in 2023 in these markets that are most exposed to these changes, and then of course now property prices are tanking on the west coast of Florida, several other Gulf metros, Southern California.
When I listen to central bankers talk about the economic risks at hand, there was a Fed official talking this morning. Her concern is about the labor market. Her concern a little bit is about inflation. You don't hear anything about climate change. That wasn't always the case. The Fed used to talk a little bit about the risks of climate change to the financial system, but now the political winds have shifted a bit, and it's not the case. So what should we be hearing in a perfect world from central bankers about this topic, and what role do they have to play here?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic because if the central banks were really actually paying attention instead of being told not to about these changes and these risks in markets, in real estate markets in particular, which really affect homeowners and households, they would probably be more accommodative, which is exactly what the administration is trying to.
Wait, tell me more about that. Why? So be more accommodative, meaning that interest rates should be lower.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a looming economic crisis like this, then you want to stay ahead of that with rates, but they're not paying attention.
What would you tell Fed Chair Jerome Powell right now about this risk and what he's missing?
I think he should be focusing on the economies where home prices are falling, and you're already starting to see delinquencies rise, unemployment rise in those areas. So to sort of look away from the aggregate and start looking at the regions that are being most acutely impacted.
What are those regions?
Most of Florida, but particularly the west coast of Florida, the Mountain West, Southern California, all along the Gulf Coast, so Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. So there's quite a few regions there. I mean, you can keep expanding. That's the thing is there's also a lot of problems with inland flooding all through the Rockies. I'm from New England. We even had problems in Vermont recently. So it's pretty broad, but those are the places where it's furthest along in this cycle. I think we're probably 2 years into a 7 or 8 year repricing cycle.
Okay, so what happens at the 8th year?
I mean, hopefully at that point, homeowners, markets understand the ongoing liability that properties will need to bear as a result of these changes in the physical environment. I mean, these are physics. Like, the government can't actually change the laws of physics, no matter how much they move the deck chairs around. And so, yeah, I'd say by the end of that, hopefully there is a pretty stable place for where home prices have gone to and are now reflecting their true value given this new structural liability.
We haven't talked much about the banks, and obviously they were at the center of the 2008 financial crisis, but what is the risk to the banks here? Obviously they are the ones lending mortgages to homeowners. Is there a connection there?
Yeah, this is a short interview, so. I mean, it's really, the whole mortgage system has changed dramatically. So the banks aren't carrying a lot of the credit risk now. Those are mostly being borne by Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie.
They're getting them off their balance sheet.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they're making loans, they're originating, they're selling them. They're not really, there's really no risk incentive for them to adjust their practices because of that dynamic.
Okay. We just have a little over a minute left, and I just want to tell the audience something cool. We have to address it. So if you are a fan of the movie The Big Short, Brad Pitt played a character based on you. How many people can say Brad Pitt played a character based on themselves? That's very cool. But you were telling me you didn't actually get to meet Brad Pitt, unfortunately.
No,
You didn't do a character study.
And I want to say that he was a composite character,
Okay.
so probably more of his lines were Ben Hockett than me, but there were
He
definitely
was
a
quite
few.
grumpy, and you don't come off as very grumpy.
No, although I do like my natural escapes. Yeah, no, I think that, well, I was telling you before is I didn't even get to meet Michael Lewis, because when he called me to interview me,
Who wrote the book the movie is based on?
I made the mistake of asking my compliance department at the hedge fund I was working at.
Can I talk to Mike Lewis? Can I talk to Michael Lewis?
No way you're talking to that person while you work here.
We have a few seconds left. I want to ask you, the financial crisis of 2008 is getting further and further away. Why does the movie The Big Short still matter now in the context of what's going on right now? No crisis ever looks the same, but why do people need to understand the 2008 crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some real close parallels. Again, it's about the presence of a significant real estate market bubble, and we saw what the fallout was from an economic perspective and for households broadly from the crisis. Even though this is more regional, it's still something that's pretty terrible. And we should be prepared. We should be working on the pricing mechanisms that create like a gradual off-ramp rather than disorderly results like what we saw in 2008 and 9 through really 11.
Okay. David Burt, everyone, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Clayton.
That was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to stay here. There is yet another guest coming to join us on stage. She's really cool. I'm really excited for this one. Her name is Abby Ross. She is the guest from the Resiliency company, and they mobilize funding and policy and cross-sector partnerships to scale up resilient infrastructure. So let's welcome the CEO to the stage, Abby Ross. Hi. Thank you again for joining us today. We had the chance to do a little bit of a chat before we got to meet in person today, and you were telling me about the Resiliency company. I'm wondering why your company matters at this moment right now. What is it that you're doing that is so important?
Yeah, great question. So at the Resiliency Company, we're focused on mobilizing capital into more resilient infrastructure. And why it's important now is because we live in a world of increasing risk. We see that through wildfires, hurricanes, severe storms, but also more slow-moving hazards like extreme heat and drought. So central to our thesis is the recognition that all of the infrastructure in our country is going to change either by force through one of those disasters or by design. So we have the engineering solutions and the technology to build things differently. We just need to do it more frequently and a lot faster.
So your company is of the belief that we can do it by design, right? You have potential solutions to make real estate more resilient to the climate shocks that are already underway. What are some examples of this happening in the U.S.?
Yeah, so I'll give you two examples. One is we know how to build roofs to stay on homes during hurricanes. About 80% of the damages, insured and uninsured, happen from your roof flying off in a hurricane. And we actually have a standard. It's built by the Institute of Building, Home, and Safety, IBHS. It's an insurance industry R&D lab that does things like simulates severe storms to keep roofs on. That is a standard that is used primarily in the Southeast in states like Florida, Alabama, and North Carolina, and is starting to get scale. So to fortify roofs is a major way to keep homes and reduce losses. Also in California, we're working on, after the fires, 12,000 homes were burnt down. There is a standard called the Wildfire Prepared Standard. So we have the building science to keep homes and embers from traveling from homes during wildfires. And so as we rebuild infrastructure, that is one of the best times to build with resilience.
I'm so glad you brought up the Los Angeles wildfire rebuilding efforts, because you were telling me that you all are involved in those efforts. I have to ask about the cost, though. Is building your home to be more resilient more expensive than building your home to be, for lack of a better word, not very resilient?
Yeah, so one really important context is that the wildfire risk is increasing. And so the kind of opportunity to build with resilience is going to be more affordable at the time of new build and rebuild. So it's a lot more expensive to retrofit a home. So the best time to do it is a new build and rebuild. And it
From the ground up?
From the ground up,
Okay,
yeah. So it does cost more today, because this is not how we've built homes for the past, hundreds of years. So to bring those new materials to market and bring them in is anywhere between $5,000 and $30,000 more. But that is an approachable number. And when you think about a market where insurers are pulling out, there are higher losses, building with insurability and resilience in mind is critical in this moment.
This is not happening in a vacuum. This is not the only crisis that companies and businesses and homeowners are worried about right now. There's also a trade war ongoing. There are, supply chain kinks and whatnot. So how are those effects affecting the rebuilding efforts and this push to be more resilient?
Sure. So we talk about the delta, the cost to rebuild with resilience is more than it is by default today, because we haven't had to do it before. So now we do. Things like tariffs, trade wars, et cetera, stress that system. But the more times we have to bake material science and more resilient home building into the process is ultimately something that over time will decrease the cost.
The other economic effect that perhaps you're having to deal with is some of the government funding cutbacks. We were talking about that on the phone. How is that impacting what the Resiliency Company does, or just your work in general?
Sure. So no surprise that there are a lot of programs that were underway around hazard mitigation, things that helped communities really de-risk at scale from floods, hurricanes, severe storms, and a lot of those programs are being pulled back. And so we're looking at what are opportunities that we can bring in private capital or new forms of capital, help those state and local governments, the municipalities that have identified a risk and actually have a scoped solution in progress, project to fix it, find new sources of capital, because these are things that have material risk to the place. That risk, and those municipalities can't pick up and leave. They are, grounded there. So those are projects that have, long-term implications, a lot of ROI, but need the capital now.
Can you take us inside a conversation you might have with a leader of a city or community who is hesitant to, include resiliency efforts in any rebuilding that needs to be done in the community?
So normally what it sounds like is not a lot of people call it climate risk today. They don't call this work adaptation and resilience. They have a problem. The road keeps flooding. Yeah. My tax base is leaving because insurance rates are happening. So the indicators of climate risk are showing up to those stakeholders in a different way. We then come in and we'll talk about climate risk and perils and CAT models and insurance rates. But ultimately, this is an economic argument, protecting your tax base, thinking about your community, building community.
Yeah, so this is kind of what David Burt was just saying, that there are these crises that may not be popping up at the macroeconomic level, but at the microeconomic level, this is something that community leaders are needing to solve for, right? As you mentioned, their tax base is leaving and they need to protect their communities. So is there a state or community in particular that is top of mind for you as an example of what you might like to see across the rest of the nation?
So there's a program called Strengthen Alabama Homes. Alabama isn't really known for their climate leadership, but this is an example where they recognize there is a material impact to their tax base, to the homeowners there, because they get a lot of hurricanes. So they had a lot of people leaving and having increase in insurance premiums. They created a program that provides a $10,000 credit to homeowners to fortify their roof. And they also baked it into policy and legislation that if you need a new roof, you have to build to the standard.
Oh, wow.
So they have fortified 50,000 roofs, and they have reduced their insurance loss ratio by 75%, and all of the homes that are built to a fortified roof have increased their home value by 8%. So a material impact at a program that is ran at the state level through a sustainable revenue model by taxing the insurance company. So you have a lot of co-beneficiaries by investing in resilience, and that really operationalizes it.
Is that example, does that kind of speak to how much of the, I hate to use the word burden, but cost burden needs to fall on the municipality versus the private sector? What is the balance there? Should it be something that is publicly funded, which is really difficult these days given the political environment, or should it be something that is more on the backs of the private sector?
Great question. One that we think about a lot. And climate risk and the exponential rate that it's increasing is not something that we can grant fund our way out of. This is something that requires, a multi-stakeholder approach, especially when you have something with so many co-beneficiaries and folks at stake, the mortgage market, the insurance rate, the homeowner, but ultimately who owns the risk and who is responsible for what intervention is a lot about what we think about. So on the residential side, you think about home hardening and home resilience as something. Well, the homeowner and the bank have kind of like the two most vested interests in that. And then the public infrastructure, the state municipality, that's something that likely, those stakeholders are thinking about through levers like public finance and possibly even some blended capital.
If I go to Alabama, how will I be able to know which home roofs are resilient versus which aren't? Just in case someone in the audience wants to do a little bit of shaming to someone in the neighborhood, how would they know?
So a couple things. One, you could talk to any real estate agent. They will tell you, this home is fortified.
It's a selling point.
It's a selling point.
That's interesting.
You can talk to any contractor as well, because they know, and a lot of contractors have now built a business around I fortify roofs.
Okay. We'll have to leave the conversation there. Thank you so much,
Thank
Abby.
you. Yeah.
We have one more conversation, at least with me. I'm so excited to speak to an economist. We talk a lot about, I would imagine, some of the macro things every day. So let's be joined by Jeremy Porter. He's the First Street chief economist. His firm builds climate and financial risk models to quantify how floods, fires, and heat are reshaping property values. So Jeremy Porter.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
All right, thank you.
We were trying to figure out where we know each other from. I think we're soul friends. We like the same stuff. We're interested in the economy, but you focus a lot more on specifically the risks to climate change. So tell me a little bit about what First Street is doing and what you have most recently found.
Yeah, so at, at First Street, we started to quantify and communicate climate risk. That was our primary mission. When we first started, we were actually a nonprofit. I'm from the academic world, so for me, it was just doing research. Like, how do we quantify risk and figure out a way to tell people that this is actually happening today, that people can sort of see more water in the streets, you can see more damages from these events. As we built these products, we ended up finding really good product market fit, actually, almost by accident, but we ended up building property level risk assessments. So people can go to Zillow, to Redfin, to Realtor.com. You can see our data there. You can make decisions around climate risk in a way that at scale communicates climate risk to your average American.
What are the risks that are most difficult for someone like you who likes numbers? What are the risks that are most difficult to quantify?
I think probably my favorite project that we've worked on is the indirect climate risk. So I think a lot of us see damages to buildings and we say, you know, we can impact a building, we can see 3 feet of water to a building, we can understand what the building's made out of, what the potential damages are in terms of dollars for recovery, insurance, those types of things. What I'm really interested in are what are the damages beyond the building? What are the impact to the community? What's the impact to the infrastructure grid, to schools, to road networks, to places of worship, things that impact a community, make those communities more desirable, and ultimately, indirectly, impact things like property value. And so like there is this connection between the direct and indirect effects. Ultimately, we focus on the direct effects, and we don't spend as much time on those indirect effects.
Can I ask you a question about the economist community? I brought this up a little bit with David Burt. This used to be a huge topic for policymakers, the Fed. It is still an important topic for central banks elsewhere, outside of the US. Why isn't the Fed talking about this more, and do you think they should?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of, there are a lot of reasons why the Fed's not talking about this as much anymore. I think we are in a place where we don't have the sticks anymore. I mean, we had a lot of regulation that was coming out. The SEC was putting out climate migration. Banks were responding to it. Corporations were responding to it. We're not in a space where that's our reality right now, but it's been really interesting because what we're seeing now is that there's more of an opportunity focus. People are thinking about climate in a way that I don't think they have in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Nowadays they're saying, all right, I don't have the stick anymore that's forcing me to report on the regulations for climate, but what are the opportunities? You know, is there a carrot attached to understanding my climate risk? Can I adapt my portfolio? Can I locate my retail sites in a more climate resilient area? So there are all these positives that I think that people are starting to think about in regard to climate risk.
But what are the implications of not having those sticks, as you call them, anymore?
So, you know, I can report on climate, I can go, you know, do press interviews, I can do these types of things. I'm a pest, right? I'm telling people about climate risk.
Not here.
Well, I'm telling you what the damages are, those types of things. When you get into the federal government, the Federal Reserve putting out reports and saying climate is impacting Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, and it's their portfolios that are being impacted, that carries a ton of weight. And you know, when organizations put out this type of information, you know, we're producing rigorous research. We're telling the same types of stories. It's hard to carry the same weight as the Fed Reserve telling everyone that the mortgage portfolios have a significant amount of flood risk. So that we lose that when we're not getting those reports.
We talk about climate in the context of the housing market. We talk a lot about what it means for residential homes. What's interesting about you is you've thought about the impact on commercial real estate. How should we be thinking about that?
Yeah, and commercial real estate's interesting because it doesn't have quite the same regulatory restrictions that the residential real estate market has, especially in the insurance space. So in the commercial space, theoretically, climate's priced properly, and you price climate, you have risk assessments, and your insurance premiums reflect that assessment. In the residential real estate market, we know that there are caps in terms of how much insurance can go up year over year.
Right, yeah.
We've seen these big gaps associated with that. What we're seeing, though, is that in the commercial space, people are interested in the cost of insurance. They're saying, you know, the cost of insurance is important to me. I want to have a line item for my investment committee so they know what that looks like. But they're more interested in things like volatility and understanding how uncertain insurance rates are. So when you start to move across these two spaces, you see different triggers for why climate's important to homeowners and why it's important to those in the commercial space.
The crisis that I've spent months and months reporting on is the work from home crisis and the impact that will have on commercial real estate. And it's been described to me as kind of this slow burn crisis that won't hit as a big shock at once. I wonder how you think about that crisis relative to the one we're talking about today with respect to climate change.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'll go back to the indirect consequences that I talked about earlier. And we've done some work actually on climate migration. And when we're modeling climate migration, we're seeing that in the US at least, there's not macro level migration across markets that's happening at a large scale. What we're seeing is that people are using local knowledge about what they know about their neighborhoods. They're avoiding parts of the community that have basements that flood during rainstorms or roads that flood during rainstorms. And what we're seeing is that areas are becoming less desirable. And there's a lot of reasons for that: school quality, all these other indicators. Climate's becoming one of those components. And as we see that areas are becoming less desirable, that ends up impacting things like tax revenues. It impacts commercial viability. It ultimately impacts rent demand for commercial properties. If you're looking for tenants in your rent building, if you don't have a certain demographic there that works in office buildings or a certain type of office building, you don't have the same rent demand. So there are these indirect effects that work their way through the system once you start to have high levels of climate risk for specific communities.
How should Congress, policymakers, how should they, in a perfect world, be using your models, your data, to set policy?
Yeah, in a perfect world, they should be using our data and our models.
Oh, just period. Okay.
Well, so one of the biggest
Jeremy Porter.
One of the biggest problems right now is unknown risk, and I think that we've spent so many years. We knew climate was a problem. We would see floods, we would see hurricanes, but we weren't systematically tracking it. We weren't attaching it to public information that people could find easily. I think actually quantifying the information from a risk-based perspective and using that type of information and making it publicly available to homeowners, to your average American. Today we're still using FEMA zones, which we know are problematic in terms of the way in which they capture flood. It'll take a congressional mandate to overhaul the way in which we map flood in this country. We're not taking any steps towards that right now. So I think partnering with somebody like us that produces purely risk-based models is a way to fill that gap.
Do you meet with members of Congress? How do you get your message out there?
We've been to the Senate floor a couple times and have submitted testimony, things like that. We've met with FEMA a handful of times. We have a partnership in the sense that we share our work with them every time that we have work. And I also always like to say that some of the best engineers in the world work at FEMA. It's not their fault that the flood models look the way that they are. They have really an impossible situation in which they have to work to produce those models. But ultimately, we just haven't seen any traction on a movement to mandate a new flood modeling approach.
What is one interesting indicator or factoid that you would share with the audience today with respect to climate change that might surprise them?
Put me on the spot there, I think.
And with 30 seconds
With
left.
30 seconds to go. I think one of the most fascinating things that I've seen is that we can already see property value losses in the market due to climate risk and location desirability changes. Following up on Dave Burt, it's not always a negative loss. Sometimes it's a lack of appreciation versus other properties that are appreciating at a faster rate.
So growing, but just at a slower rate. Okay,
we're already seeing it in the market.
Got it. Well, Jeremy Porter, everyone, thank you so much. I want to thank you all for being here today. Our next program is going to start shortly. We have speaking of senators, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Feel free to get coffee, stick around, chat, and thank you again for joining Axios. All right. Thank you.
Please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Love to see the standing room only and full house. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Amy Harder. I just rejoined Axios a couple of weeks ago. I'm their national energy correspondent, and I am thrilled to be here. I co-author the newly released Future of Energy newsletter. Raise your hand if you are signed up for Future of Energy, which was just renamed from Generate. Okay, I saw some hands not go up. So for those who did not raise your hands, you can go to your phones, Axios.com, and sign up. And if you're joining us online and posting on social media, please use the hashtag AxiosHouse. And don't forget to continue to join us this week at Axios House. We have more programming this afternoon and tomorrow morning, including Patagonia CEO Ryan Gillert, climate investor Tom Steyer. And tomorrow, I'll be interviewing Chris Levesque, CEO of TerraPower, and my colleague will be interviewing Clay Sell, CEO of X Energy, to have a conversation about nuclear power. Without further ado, I want to welcome our stage a special guest who I can tell has a lot of fans based upon this group to discuss current policy issues for improving climate resilience and responding to a lot of the news that has been happening this week. So please welcome to the stage Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
I think the last time we chatted was a few years ago, and it was all about offshore wind and the growth we were going to see there around
Which we did.
Yes, we did. And I have some questions about that, but we're going to put a pin in that just to keep the audience enticed.
Short answer, we won.
So I understand that you're here at Climate Week in New York to talk about something that some folks who may have been here for the earlier panels with my colleague Courtney about sort of the economic risks of climate change in terms of home mortgages and home insurance. Yeah. And I want to hear about that specifically, but before we get to what you're wanting to talk about, one challenge that I have, for a world whose attention span seems to be shrinking faster than the ice sheets, which is still pretty fast, how do you break through to talk about a problem while hugely significant moves at a far slower pace than TikTok?
Well, I think you got to talk about it right, just for starters. And I think you've got to raise the heat level where it's justified. And with respect to climate, I think raising the heat level a lot is justified. It was very frustrating through the Biden administration to have the sum of the conversation be like polar bears and green jobs and no. What we have is the biggest fraudulent operation in American history, the climate denial operation, running next to one of the biggest corruption operations in American history, the dark money fossil fuel influence operation. And if you don't call it that, then you're just denying yourself one of the most important aspects of the topic. So raise the heat, call it out, and we'll move on to the homeowners insurance thing. But it gets real fast when it starts to hit people's pocketbooks hard, and it's not about polar bears and somebody else's green job any longer. So,
but do they connect it to climate change?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But
we did a poll in Texas.
But more people than ever voted for President Trump. in this last election. So how do you square that circle?
Well, I think we hadn't really made climate change an issue. We hadn't made it a real fight. The Biden administration was not very long on having big fights. And, here you have really a central casting quality, actual true villain, performing actual central casting quality, true villainy. And nobody wanted to talk about that. And I think people were looking for a fighter, and God bless Trump, he'd fight with that column over there just for the fun of it. So nobody had any doubts about him, and I don't think we broke through because we didn't have the temperature and we weren't being accurate.
So you think Democrats need to be more, they need to fight more?
Oh, yeah.
And so how
accurately, not just like making a lot of mean noise.
Not with
but
that
like
column
bang,
over
bang,
there.
bang. Not with the column over there. No, with the fossil fuel money, climate denial, and dark money influence operations. Oh, yeah.
So tell me about the home mortgage. How does that factor into climate change? Because I think most people don't really think about it.
Well, surprisingly, a lot of people do. We took a poll when I went down to Texas. In Texas, of Texans, 92%, homeowners insurance cost is a concern to me. It was more than healthcare, more than mortgages, more than groceries. 63% very concerned. And here was the one that surprised me. 66% already saw that there was some connection with climate change. We asked it very broadly, but when 66% of Texans recognize that the weather risk that is blowing up their homeowners insurance has something to do with climate, we're in a very good launch position to make this a major, major issue. If you go to Florida, it is explosive with the public. In Texas, it's those numbers, and I think we're going to continue to explore, but we're going to Mississippi, North Carolina, Louisiana, South Carolina,
how do you translate
Georgia.
these polling numbers that you cite to actually policies that move the needle on climate, whether it's electing different people? Are you going to enlist the insurance industry to put a bunch of dollars on the air to convince people?
The first thing you have to do is get the message out that this thing that is really bothering you, and by the way, if your home insurance cost goes up 10%, that's like $1,000 or more dollars. That's a big deal. If peanut butter goes up 10%, it's a different thing. So these are big hits to family budgets, and you compound that with the fearful annoyance of suddenly getting that letter from your insurance company saying, we're not renewing your policy. Good luck out there. So people are really roiled about this, and you have the chance to say, these guys have not been listening to you in all of your economic distress about this. Instead, they've been lying to you because their pockets are full of fossil fuel money. And you connect the cost part of the argument and the corruption part of the argument, and I think it's powerful, and I hope that it wins a bunch of races.
So speaking of fighting words.
With the added benefit of being true.
Speaking of fighting words, raise your hand if you've heard President Trump's speech today at the UN. This is, after all, the UN General Assembly. Okay, good to know. So in case you missed it, it's a very wide-ranging speech. And those laughing.
But solidly grounded in truth.
He talked a lot about climate change and, calling it the greatest con job ever, brutal green energy policies. And I don't want to get into I don't need to ask you to respond to that because I think we're past that at this point. But I want to ask you, Senator, you've been doing this for a long time, 300 plus speeches on the Senate floor about this topic. How do you keep going? Why do you keep going?
I got to say, I kind of like the fighting. I've got a really good office, and I've got a sky full
Are you going to apply for a bigger office? Do you want to make some news today?
No. I've got a really good Senate office, and I've got a sky full of targets. And I remember those RAF boys who went up into the air in the Battle of Britain. And if they lost, they died. And they had to feel awful that the Nazis were all over Europe, and they had to feel awful that buzz bombs were falling in London. But by God, they had a sky full of targets, and they had their Spitfires, and there's joy in that. So you find your targets, and you fly at them, and you do your best.
How do you think the Democratic Party is doing right now? Yes, on climate, but on the broader topic, I don't see a lot of fighters in the Democratic Party.
You know,
Maybe
I
Governor
think
Newsom.
we need to recover a little bit from the tepid tone that the Biden administration tended to operate in, sort of sepia and tepid. But you know, I think there's plenty of talent out there, and there's plenty of fight that is taking place. And I'm actually pretty confident about where we stand. I think that, you know, when people always say, well, the Democrats are doing terrible because nobody supports them and their numbers are terrible. Well, their numbers are terrible because our own side is wants to see more and better. But when you get to an actual choice, an actual contest, then I think our voters come home. And so I'm not as panicked about where our numbers are. Heck, I'm in the no column on are Democrats doing a good job yet? So, and I'm one of the Democrats trying to do a good job. So you know, I think a lot of that anxiety will dissipate as people come home and as our arguments develop into an election. And Trump publicly saying such complete nonsense as this kind of actually adds to our point, because when people are looking at, let's say, they can't sell their home because the person who's trying to buy it keeps getting turned down for insurance because their home is now uninsurable because of climate change, that's pretty real to them. And if you've got this character calling it a hoax and saying all this nonsense, you know, when 66% of Texans see the connection, there's a there, and he's just making himself more and more out of step with people. And on this issue, it's really coming home to roost in family budgets and family pocketbooks.
Maybe someday, Senator, you and I can go to Texas and talk to some of those people responding to that poll.
Been there for that purpose, yeah.
Okay, well, when you go next time, can I come along and
Sure.
we can talk? Because I would love to put some faces
They
behind
get it from
those
hail,
names.
they get it from flooding, they get it from wildfire, they get all the...
But I bet a lot of them still supported Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's your challenge. That's where the fight comes in.
But
So
we hadn't lifted this issue up into the political
And now you're going
space. Correct.
So I want to move to something that we teased at the beginning, offshore wind. So as some of you may have seen, a federal judge ordered an offshore wind project off the coast of your state of Rhode Island to resume construction. You called this a quick win.
Yep.
What signal do you think this sends about the future of offshore wind battles? And do you think the Trump administration will back down after this?
I don't know what they're going to do, but we have a very good court order out of the federal court in D.C. We have another case pending up in the federal court in Rhode Island. So it's belt and suspenders, and I'm pretty confident just from seeing the way they went about it, they made a complete hash of their stupid stop work order. Could not have been more arbitrary and capricious. If you wanted to paint an order that's perfect for being overturned by judges, that was it. So I think with those things locked in, it's very hard for them to come back. I suspect if they try some new way to stop work on some other subject, it'll be easy to prove that this is all done in completely bad faith and get a protective order saying no more messing with this project without coming through the courtroom first, because your good faith is simply disproven here. So it's unfortunate that it has to come to this, and it costs quite a lot of money for the developer to have to go through this. But when you think about it, you know, imagine that a Democratic president had essentially confiscated or tried to confiscate several $1 billion in investment in a project.
Now, the Republicans say that's what Obama did with the Keystone XL project.
Yeah. That was nearly 80% complete, or was 80% completed, and had every permit in order already.
You're talking about the offshore wind farm?
Yes.
Okay.
Every
but
permit
Keystone
in order already.
was also somewhat
different.
largely built. Okay.
They're different because of having everything, all the ducks in a row. And indeed, in this case, the Trump administration had argued against the stop work order from when it was defending this very project against other litigants. So it was a complete mess.
This
and
makes me
good
think.
win.
This makes me think of the saying, "You won the battle but lost the war." I mean, all of these lawsuits, even if the developer ultimately wins, it's chilling investment for an industry that is barely off. I mean, I would say it's not even out of the blocks. I ran track in high school, so I think of blocks. It's sitting there in the blocks, and it might just fall down. I mean, how worried are you about the offshore wind industry writ large in the U.S.?
In the U.S., it's going to go through a stall because it's hard to move through the regulatory process with an administration that's determined to stop you. Once you're through it, though, which is where Revolution Wind is, that's a different thing. But, you know, let's say Trump is 3 years. This is an industry that's lasted many more years than that, and it's going to continue to grow all around the world. And if we get left behind again, the way we risk being left behind on EV manufacturing, the way we risk being left behind on solar manufacturing and things like that, because we've turned into a temporary petro state, then, you know, we're just going to have to take those hits. And this hit, by the way, goes well beyond offshore wind. Anybody looking at this Trump administration and looking at making a huge multi-billion-dollar investment in any project that requires federal approvals now knows that they're amenable to a complete whim attack on their project that cost them.
The Energy Secretary did just tell Axios in an exclusive interview yesterday that offshore wind is actually, quote, a one-off, and they're not going to go after other projects.
Well, they probably have heard that lesson from people all around the country saying, what the hell, I'm investing in this factory, I'm investing in batteries, I'm investing in the solar manufacturing plant, I'm investing in this, that, and the other, and now the signal to all of those investors is, whoa, stall, don't do it. Donald Trump is now the stop work president.
I want to ask about nuclear power. Now, you're one of the few Democrats that have been consistently supportive of nuclear power as a climate solution. Just today, we reported in Axios that former Vice President Al Gore is also warming up to it, even more than perhaps he has in the past, because he's been more critical. And he cites the fact that AI developers are willing to pay a higher price for what has been a persistently high price in the nuclear industry. Do you agree with that? And is this one area where you could actually agree with Secretary Wright?
Could. I think the danger is that the entire U.S. nuclear industry depends to a very significant degree on the credibility and independence of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And if they continue screwing around with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and trying to basically make it a little subgroup of the Department of Energy and doggy out all of the good, capable staffers who know their stuff so that it's now not either capable or independent, then that strikes a real blow to the heart of the industry. And if they stop doing that, then I think we can find lots of room for agreement. I think
you sound more critical than you have in the past.
Of the attack on the NRC? Yeah, I think the attack on the NRC is very bad. But if you look at small modular reactors, they're starting to come alive. The reactors that can actually go through our spent fuel and find reuse for what is now just a huge liability, that's a huge potential. And then the ability to drop in a new way to boil water where it used to be oil or natural gas. The turbines are already there. The transformers are already there. The grid is already hooked up. Experienced workforce is already there. All you have to do to make it clean is boil water a different way with nuclear power. And so there are places where the replacement of an existing fossil furnace with nuclear heat, I think, can be a big success. And then there's huge growing global demand, and the climate crisis is deadly real. I mean, we're kind of at the point of no return on that. So,
well, we are almost out of time, so I want to change the pace a moment and do a concluding game of Would You Rather.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Senator?
Fire away.
Okay.
Have a different president. Yes.
Wow. Would you rather spend a summer installing solar panels on hot rooftops in Phoenix or a winter laying transmission lines in Alaska?
I do better in cold because you can dress better for it, so I'd go with Alaska.
I think the Norwegians say there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad
clothing. Yeah.
And you can't do that as much on the hot side. You don't hear Phoenix residents saying that. Would you rather be a lawmaker 100 years ago or 100 years from now?
That's an interesting question. what the heck was going on in 1925? I think we were cruising into a massive recession. So I think maybe if we'd had the ability to see the Depression coming, the way we can see the mortgage market meltdowns from the insurance meltdown and all the climate-related economic harms that are going to come, as Ernest Hemingway said, gradually and then suddenly, I think I'd probably go back 100 years. Do I get to know what I know now?
No, unfortunately, but stay tuned in about 30 seconds. I have a question on that. Would you rather run your Senate office entirely on typewriters or entirely on AI assistants?
I don't trust AI enough yet. Typewriters.
Wow, hot take. Okay, final one. Would you rather change the past or see the future?
I think the way to change the future to what you see is to change the past, if you could, because we can't. We got to change the present, and that's why Climate Week matters.
Well, with that, Senator, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone in our audience, for joining us this morning. We have more programming beginning in just about an hour, so please stick around.